You're now watching a clip from the Inspired by show. You can watch the full episode on our YouTube channel or listen on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure to head over there, leave us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed it, and follow the show. You mentioned there that you had 2 novels first, which I love because I didn't know that about you. And I think a lot of people, I'm just going to take the veil off, if you will, lift the veil. A lot of people will be thinking, oh, it's all easy for Claire because she's now, Talking at Night is amazingly successful and she's published by Penguin. But I think it's really reassuring and nice to be honest with the fact that it wasn't necessarily your first book and there were 2 novels before that. So tell us a bit about that experience.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. This was, so the acquisition and the story of Talking at Night felt very quick and like a whirlwind, which I'm sure we will kind of get into. But it was years and years of trying and failing to write a novel that would get published. So as I said, I spent years just writing for fun. And when I get in a rut or I get stuck or I got rejections, I tried to sort of go back to that childhood, just love and joy when you don't have a reader, you don't have anyone looking over your shoulder, you're not worrying if you're good enough, you are just writing because you love telling stories. And I think as an adult, you lose that. And that is really hard because, of course, all the voices come in about whether it's good enough, interesting enough, whether it's ever going to get you anywhere, and all of those things, which are sort of demons that I think every writer struggles with, no matter whether they're published or not. I'm so sorry, I forgot the question.
So what was it like having the 2 novels first?
Thank you.
Yeah.
All these cameras, it's like, oh, where is my brain going?
So cool.
So I was writing throughout university. I actually studied art, which is a bit of a weird one, but lots of people, I knew I wanted to be a writer. So the fact that I went to art school was kind of an interesting decision. But I think I felt lots of writers go and study English, which was sort of the obvious choice, which I loved English as well. But I felt like I wanted to explore creativity in a slightly different way and how interesting that might be and what a different edge it might give me. So I was making lots of practical artwork about words, about language, about narrative, whilst at art school. And I just had these incredible tutors who noticed that I was, very much a writer, essentially. And I wasn't sort of secret about it, but I had this one tutor in particular called Brian Catling, who really sadly passed away just last year, before he could see that he was in the acknowledgements of Talking at Night as well, which was really heartbreaking. But I remember him saying to me, I don't want you working for a publishing house. I want you being published, which was just such an incredible thing to hear as a kind of, young 20-something, secretly writing books and having them like under the desk, and he'd noticed. And that was the first time I really thought, maybe I need to give this a bit more focus than just, I love doing it, I'm going to do it for fun. And of course, you have to pay the bills. I had to be realistic. I couldn't just leave art school and suddenly be writing novels and hoping that they got picked up. And even if they do get picked up, you don't earn hundreds of thousands of pounds being a writer. So I took his advice and I started writing full sort of proper novels immediately after I graduated. And so there were 2 books, as I said, that I was working on around sort of my full-time jobs. The first one was so long. I look back at it now. I think it was something like 140,000 words. And you don't get told this stuff until you start genuinely looking into it. But most publishers won't pick up, a debut novel that's anything more than sort of 100,000, 80 to 100,000. I didn't know that. I'd never done any research. All I was doing was blindly writing and, enjoying myself and hoping for the best. And I sent it out to several agents once it was finished and once I'd edited it and once I thought I was happy with it. And a few months of sort of general rejections, but they were nice rejections, which was a really positive thing. They weren't general and they weren't just go back to your day job. They had these glimmers of, what you've submitted is stronger than more than what we see, but it's not for us this time around. So it was just that little bit of something that meant I kept going. And I I think after about 6 months, a year of querying to agents. For those who don't know, you send out basically an email to agents with a sort of synopsis of your book, 10,000 words of the beginning. And then if they like it, they call in the full manuscript. And I can still remember the first time that happened with that first novel. I was sat on the sofa with my partner, and it was just still one of the most exciting things that happened as a writer, because it was like, it'd just been constant rejection. So to get someone email you personally and address you and say, I can still remember what she said about it, and that it was weirdly relatable to her own experience, and that it was strange reading, so she would love to read the full thing. And that felt so exciting, like and I think as a writer, it's so vital to celebrate the small wins, because you get so many knockbacks. So that was very exciting. But as I've said, it was sort of 6 months of back and forth with this poor agent who basically realised this is such a long, winding novel. And she did say to me, it's too long, edit it down, which I did. I think I cut about 30,000 words, and it still wasn't right for her. So that was a really hard moment of being like, I thought I was close, but no cigar.
Oh.
And it was at that point that I thought, I've spent years working on this book, and I just feel like it's time to write something new. So with Love, I put it in a drawer, began my second novel. And it was at that point, I was still getting more rejections from other agents, and again, still positive ones. And I just felt at that point, I'd started down a road of trying to take it more seriously. I was going to lots of events, hearing authors speak, hearing agents speak. I was learning how to broach agents. And I was also learning that I wanted to learn about the craft. And I never had. I was a voracious reader. I loved reading. I loved writing. But there was a part of me that really wanted to go and do a creative writing master's. But realistically, I couldn't afford to take the time out of work. And also, obviously, financially, it's a huge undertaking. And I was going to lots of free kind of writing workshops, and there was just nothing else that lit me up in that same way. Wow. And I can remember vividly going to a literary festival, which back then was called the Emerald Street Literary Festival. It was the Stylist book festival that they put on every year. It was fabulous. And you booked in for these sort of salons or various talks, and the Faber Academy were putting on a free workshop. And it was a game-changing workshop for me. Wow. And I remember thinking, I need to put my time and sort of energy and money into learning about writing, because I felt like I'd given it my best shot with passion and my love of books, and it just wasn't quite enough. And I remember approaching the head of Faber Academy, Richard Skinner, who took the workshop at the end of the day, and saying to him, this course sounds amazing, but I work full time, and am I able to fit it around full-time work? And he said, oh, yes, it's designed for people in work. So I was so excited. I left the festival with like a spring in my step, and I remember phoning my husband and being like, I'm going to apply for the Faber Academy. It's going to be great. And then I got home and saw that it was, it's still £4,000, because it's essentially a master's course in half the time. And I can just remember my heart sinking, because I was, a young professional on a publishing sort of assistant wage. So I went away and I saved up for sort of 3 years, applied, thankfully got a place, and I was still writing my second novel whilst I was at Faber. And I finished the Faber course with that novel finished. And off the back of that was when 4 agents were interested in that book. So again, it was another stepping stone off an opportunity. And I yet again had that same excitement and that same rejection. So 4 agents reaching out, wanting to read the full story, and then all coming back saying, I really loved your writing, but I don't know where this would sit in the market. I don't know how I would sell it. Please get in touch again in the future. So it was just this, I kept feeling as though I was getting closer and closer and closer, but it was, I know you say that I talk about it with joy and positivity, which is so lovely, because I hope that comes across, but there were a lot of moments where you feel crushed and like you just can't continue. It's like it's a long project writing a novel, and you stick with it day in, day out, and to then again feel as though it was going nowhere. I had really sort of tough weeks of thinking, why do I bother? What am I doing? Maybe I should just can this. And I now look back on it, I'm like, well, every word that I wrote for those 2 novels got me to Talking at Night. I wouldn't have written Talking at Night without learning from those 2 books, how to write a novel, how not to write a novel. It made me a much better editor doing that Faber course. I was much more ruthless with myself. And it was actually off the back of one of those agents who reached out to me for that second novel. She actually phoned me up instead of emailing me, which again was such a big moment because I'd only ever had email rejections. And her name was Ariella Finer. She is now my literary agent. And we had a good, constructive, hour-long conversation where she really took the time to sort of say to me, and she even said, she was like, I don't know whether I should say this to you, but I've been agonizing over whether to offer you representation for this novel. She was like, I love it, but it doesn't really know what it is. And it's too quiet. And that's the feedback I continued to get about my writing. Too quiet, which for those not in the sort of publishing arena means not enough happens. You know, a lot of my books are, or what I like to write, slow burns, character studies. A lot of my favourite published novels are quiet novels, but in the industry it can be seen as a very negative term. And all throughout school, it was always the feedback I got, Claire's too quiet. She doesn't say enough. She needs to put her hand up more. And there was just a part of me that thought, why are we always told to be extroverted and loud? And why is that the only way to get ahead? So I didn't change while I was at school, and I decided I am not going to change how I write, but I do need to listen in some sort of strategic way. And she was so brilliant at saying to me, you know, you can either rework this novel that I love and you make it louder, give it some splashier sort of content, or I'd love to hear what you're writing next. And I was like, well, I'm writing a love story. Which was Talking at Night, and Talking at Night had been percolating for probably about 6 years. So I do think there's something in writing what needs to be written at the right time. There was a reason that Talking at Night, I hadn't started writing that 6 years before. I needed to go through book 1 and 2 to be a better writer, to understand the craft better. So I pitched her what I was writing, and she said, okay, you know, send me 50 pages of that when it's ready, but it has to be absolutely perfect. You can't go rushing it and just sending it to me. Like, this is an opportunity. And I remember my
no pressure much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
No pressure. Oh. But my husband was so great. He was like, does she know who she's talking to? Because I'm like a terrible perfectionist, to the point of I could just sit on a novel forever and do nothing with it. So I finished those 50 pages, and they were the opening 50 pages of Talking at Night, and she signed me that day. And it was just, it was an amazing phone call.